Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be talking about 1993, but instead of talking about things that did happen, we'll be talking about things that did not happen. Rumors are a fun part of the sport, telling us about things that may happen in the future. Not all of these rumors end up coming true though. I've been looking through reports from 1993 to find some of these rumors and reports that did not come true and going over them here. I can't guarantee all of these necessarily had any truth behind them, but they were all reported, so I think they're interesting to look back on regardless. I have both rumors from Formula One and IndyCar, so we'll be going over the Formula One rumors first, and then the IndyCar ones, and then finally look back at some which involve both Formula One and IndyCar. Also, one more thing. Just to clarify, these are rumors and stories from the 1993 calendar year, so they would not have necessarily affected the 1993 season, with many of them involving 1994. Before getting into these rumors though, if you enjoyed the video, then please give it a like and share the video, and also for more similar content, you can subscribe to the channel. So for our first rumor, we have one that can be found in what feels like every year, and that is a Ferrari quit threat. Ferrari had one of their worst seasons in team history in 1992, and the early signs in 1993 before the season started were that things were still not good with the team. Team president Luca de Montezemolo said the team was not happy with how much of a role advanced technology was playing in the sport and said they may look to a series with simpler cars such as IndyCar or sports cars. He said there is nothing forcing us to stay in F1. It must change its rules to be closer to the technology of mass-produced road cars. The level of F1 technology has reached a point where 95% of it cannot be passed on to the product. We have no intention of quitting racing, but we must see some changes quickly because we are seriously considering changing plans. We have already made some feasibility studies. While it is likely Ferrari would not have quit regardless, they did get their wish for 1994 with many of the advanced technologies being banned from Formula One and the team seeing their performance improve with it. Of course, a few years later, they would bring in Michael Schumacher along with many new team personnel, including Ross Brawn, and went on one of the most dominant runs in the sport's history. The next one I have involves Honda. Honda joined Formula One as an engine supplier in the early 80s and transformed as the engine to have, winning championships with Williams and McLaren in the late 80s and early 90s. However, things took a turn when McLaren and Honda struggled to match the dominant Williams-Renault in 1992, leaving Honda to pull out of the sport. It appeared they might not be gone for long, though, and when they rejoined, they would have their own team to build the car along with the engine. Honda still allowed their engineers to work on their own projects in their free time, and many got working on building a Formula One car. Eventually, they completed its chassis, and Honda showed off the car to select members of the media and even had it pass a FISA crash test. Satoru Nakajima even tested the model. However, Honda was already focused on entering IndyCar as an engine supplier in 1994, and with this being more of an after-hours project, it was probably never really realistic that Honda would make such a quick comeback. Next, we'll be looking at a potential rule change for 1993. 1992 was not the most exciting season at the front, with Nigel Mansell and Williams dominating, and some were looking for a way to spice up the action. One proposal that came up was to bring out the safety car when the race leader built up a lead of at least 12 seconds, a maximum of 4 times a race. At this time, the safety car was not used at all, and if there was an incident large enough to cause an issue, the race would just be red flagged, but for the most part, everything was covered under local yellows. As expected, leading teams Williams and McLaren were against the idea, as were midfielders Ligier and Lotus, and the procedure as proposed was never implemented. It was decided, however, to implement the safety car for larger incidents instead of covering everything under local yellows or the rare red flag. The standards for the type of incident that required a safety car were a lot different than today, and for the next 10 years or so, it would still be a rare occurrence to see the safety car used in a Grand Prix. I believe a similar proposal came up again about 10 years later, but once again that was shut down. Our next one involves teams running 3 cars. With McLaren not expecting Ayrton Senna to return in 1993, they signed IndyCar star Michael Andretti to one seat and former Lotus driver Mika Hakkinen to another. However, as it came closer to the start of the season, it appeared that Senna may want to return to McLaren instead of taking the year off that he was rumored to be doing. With a potential problem of 3 drivers for 2 cars, McLaren was hopeful they could potentially race 3 cars to keep all 3 drivers in a race seat, but there was a problem. Teams would only be allowed to race 3 cars if the entry list was below 26 cars, and at the time it stood at 28. There were question marks over a few of the entered teams though, with March eventually pulling out by the start of the year, but that still left 26 cars on the grid. During the summer, McLaren even filed paperwork to enter a third car for Hakkinen should the situation arise. Later in the year after Portugal, BMS Scuderia Italia withdrew from the last 2 races of the season, bringing the grid down to 24 cars, which made other teams also consider running 3 cars. Benetton was reportedly interested in running Luca Badoer, and Taro wanted to run Naoki Hattori, but it was later agreed to not have any teams run 3 cars, as it could bring controversy of which teams would be allowed to do so. The World Council also decided to ban teams entering 3 cars from 1994 onwards, and while there have been rumors from time to time of them coming back, the ban still remains in place. As far as the situation at McLaren, Andretti left the team following the Italian Grand Prix, letting Hakkinen race with them for the final 3 races. Riccardo Patrese drove with Williams from the final race of the 1987 season through 1992 with reasonable success, including second place in the 1992 championship. With rumors of Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna looking to join Williams in 1993 along with Mansell already in the team, he thought there would be no room for him, so he opted to move to Benetton for 1993 to be teammates with Michael Schumacher. However, his early results were not impressive, and after the 3rd race of the season at Donington, there were already rumors that Benetton was looking to get rid of him immediately. The rumored potential replacement for him were Rubens Barrichello, who had impressed in his first 3 starts with Jordan, and Mika Hakkinen, who was on the sidelines with McLaren after Senna's return. Either one of these racing along Schumacher at the time could have been fascinating to see, but Benetton stuck with Patrese, who would retire at the end of the year. Alessandro Nannini had been out of Formula One for a few years following a helicopter crash which severed his right arm, but I still found an interesting rumor involving him. He is one of Formula One's top drivers in the late 80s and returned to racing in 1993 competing in DTM, but he had his sights set elsewhere for 1994. Perhaps surprisingly, he wanted to move to NASCAR. He held conversations with Ford Competitions director Michael Kranifus about potentially testing a car and came away hoping to land a test by the end of the year. I'm not sure if this got any further, but Nannini continued racing in touring cars through 1996 and then in the FIA GT Championship in 1997. Now we have one that involves Michael Schumacher. With Senna leaving for Williams in 1994, McLaren was in need of an established star driver, and apart from getting Mansell to come back from IndyCar, Michael Schumacher would pretty much be the only option. Despite McLaren's interest, Schumacher was under contract with Benetton for 1994, and Flavio Briatore showed no interest in letting Schumacher leave. However, there was a rumor of Benetton talking to Mansell, which could have been a replacement for Schumacher, or even potentially bringing in Prost along with Renault engines. Of course, Schumacher ended up staying with Benetton for another 2 seasons, in which he won his first 2 world championships. I don't want to get too much into rumors involving driver switching teams, as I may leave those for separate videos, but a few other interesting ones I came across during the year included Benetton also looking at Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, Michele Alboreto, and Luca Badoer, Rubens Barrichello also going to McLaren, Alain Prost returning to McLaren, Michael Andretti to Jordan, and Gilles de Ferran to either Simtek, Tyrrell, or Pacific. This next one may be the most famous rumor that never happened from 1993 and one that you may already be familiar with. Lamborghini engines had been in Formula One since 1989, but they only were supplied to back markers and struggled to post significant results. McLaren were unhappy though with being supplied customer Ford engines and were looking for a new engine deal for 1994. Rumors surfaced late in the summer that McLaren was building a car at their factory which could run the V12 Lamborghini engine, and that they already had some of the engines at their factory. However, it was speculated that this would be more of a test for Lamborghini to see if their engine could be a potential winner in the right car, so it was far from a sure thing that the two would pair together in 1994. Senna and Hakkinen famously tested the Lamborghini engine in plain white McLarens and both gave positive feedback, and Senna reportedly wanted to use it at the next race in Suzuka. There were questions over the engine's reliability though, and McLaren used the Ford for the remainder of the year and would eventually sign with Peugeot to supply him with engines for 1994. As for Lamborghini, they did not remain in Formula One in 1994 and have not returned since. Parent company Chrysler also reportedly was considering an IndyCar future as well once it became apparent they would not be back in F1 in order to compete against their perceived rivals Honda and Toyota, but that would not happen either. One other note before getting into the IndyCar rumors. I also found a note saying that there is a new point system approved for the 1994 Formula One season which would give up points down to 10th place. I can't find what the distribution of points would have been or even why it didn't happen, but they continued using the then current point system of 10, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1 through 2002. Now let's get into the IndyCar rumors. The first IndyCar one I have involves Brands Hatch trying to get an IndyCar race after an increase in popularity, mainly based off Nigel Mansell's switch that year. The track had initial discussions with the IndyCar board about the idea, but Roger Penske quickly said that he did not think they should race there. He said the series should continue to focus on racing in North America, as that's where most of their sponsors are from, and they should only consider racing in Britain if a suitable oval was built. Further rumors surfaced about a non-championship race in October that year, a few weeks after the season finale in Laguna Seca, with the team owners pretty much unanimously against it. Chip Ganassi said that he would be on a beach on vacation then and his team would be doing the same, and Penske said, "I hope they have a nice time. My cars won't be there." It was then revealed, though, that the teams would be offered $1 million in prize money for the race, which enticed some of the teams, but Carl Haas, who is one of the race's biggest supporters, even said that he may not be able to get Mansell to race as his contract is only for 16 races. When put to a vote, the IndyCar board turned down the proposal, ending the rumor. There was an IndyCar race at Brands Hatch back in 1978 under USAC, and Champ Car returned there in 2003, but IndyCar in this era would not race at Brands Hatch. Honda had already been preparing for joining IndyCar in 1994, but for a bit it looked like they may have another manufacturer joining them in the series. Early in 1993, Nissan was having internal discussions about whether they should enter IndyCar. The engine would supposedly be developed by Judd, who had recent IndyCar experience, and Nissan said the goal would be to start racing in the middle of the 1994 season. They also said they had a long-term goal of also building a chassis, but would initially use one of the current chassis manufacturers. They even had a likely driver for the project as well, saying they had a handshake deal with Jeff Brabham. Just weeks later, though, they abandoned their plans for economic reasons and to focus more on their road cars. However, Nissan would eventually compete in IndyCar when the IRL created a new normally aspirated formula in 1997 under an Infinity badge and stayed there through 2002. This next one I have is quite radical. Speeds at the Indy 500 were reduced in 1993 from the prior year due to the combination of technical changes as well as the loss of the track's apron, but supposedly USAC and the Speedway discussed if they should go even further for 1994. One idea was to limit engine power, but another one they had was to remove both the front and rear wings from the cars. Both the chassis and engine manufacturers were against these ideas, and a few weeks later, new regulations were announced for 1985 in which downforce would again be cut, but wings would stay. The radical wingless car proposal was referenced, but it was determined that the rear wing was necessary for stabilizing the car. Along with Michael Andretti returning to IndyCar in 1894, the big name on the driver market was Unser Jr. He had been driving for Gallus Racing since 1988, but was looking for new opportunities, and there was no shortage of takers. He held negotiations with Newman Haas, and Ganassi showed strong interest as well. There were even rumors that he would be involved in starting a new team with both his dad and Pat Patrick. In the end, though, he would opt to go to Penske in 1884, and while his other options may have been stronger in the second half of the 90s, it would be hard to argue that he could have made a better decision than Penske for 1984. On top of the rumors of Unser being involved in a new team, there is also a rumor of Emerson Fittipaldi starting his own team using the new Honda engine. So now we're on to the rumors involving both series, and to start that off, we'll take a look at a few Formula One drivers who are considering a move to IndyCar. First, there is Martin Brundle, and this one would have been for the 1993 season. He had yet to secure a Formula One drive for 1993, and rumors linked him to a part-time ride in IndyCar with Tom Walkinshaw Racing. However, he admitted that the chances he did this was remote, and that he was still hoping to secure an F1 deal first. Just a few weeks later, he was confirmed as a driver for Ligier in 1893. After leaving Jordan just 2 races into the 1993 season, Ivan Capelli said that IndyCar would be the next step in his career and that he would be going to Indianapolis to have a look, but no further information followed on that. However, Capelli wasn't the only driver to look at IndyCar after leaving Jordan in 1993. Thierry Boutsen competed in his final race with the team in Belgium and afterwards said he was looking forward to a competitive, well-financed plan for IndyCar racing. Derek Warwick was another driver who threw his name among those who were interested in making an IndyCar switch. He had tested a car for Hall VDS Racing in 1982 and said that he enjoyed the scene and had made some good contacts and was hopeful to reach a deal for 1994. By the time the IndyCar season was coming to an end, many of these drivers were in the IndyCar paddock, and at Nazareth, Warwick and Boutsen were there along with Michele Barretto, Fabrizio Barbazza, and Stefano Modena. This obviously caused a logjam in the market, as while there were more competitive seats in IndyCar than F1, there were still only so many, and it wasn't enough for all these drivers along with the current IndyCar stars. As for Warwick, though, his possibilities did not end with IndyCar. Like Nannini, he was thinking about NASCAR. He said he had an offer to test in NASCAR and said he would consider competing in the series, but did have worries about how long the calendar was. Next, we had the possibility of Nigel Mansell returning to Formula One. With his success in IndyCar and Formula One success not too far behind him, it seemed logical for a Formula One team to still be interested in signing him. During the summer, Mansell said that he was receiving interest from Benetton for a drive in 1994, but also said it was likely he'd remain in America for 1994. While he would not say too much more about his future publicly, Carl Haas stated he had a contract with Mansell for 1994, so he had no worries that he would be driving elsewhere. There is even another rumor that, like Unser and Fittipaldi, Mansell would start his own IndyCar team in 1994 for which he would drive for. In the end, Mansell would sign a deal to stay in IndyCar in 1994, but he would actually return to Formula One as well in a part-time role with Williams following the death of Ayrton Senna. Our next one involves Mansell again, but this time in a different way. Early in his IndyCar career, he had a heavy crash during practice at the Phoenix Oval, causing a back injury. This forced him to miss the race, but he would return for the next race at Long Beach. The Indy 500 followed, and as it approached, there were rumors that Mansell's back injury was serious enough for him to miss that race. If that was the case, there was speculation that his Newman Haas team would go after the best possible replacement. That would be the driver Mansell replaced in the IndyCar, Michael Andretti. The schedule would have worked fine with the first weekend of qualifying being an off week for Formula One and the race itself being the week after the Monaco Grand Prix. Ron Dennis supposedly approved the idea and was even prepared to race Hakkinen at Monaco even though the two races did not conflict. As things happened though, Mansell was fit enough to race and led late but would ultimately finish third. This next one I have doesn't directly involve IndyCar, but you'll be able to see that they certainly did have an influence in this rumor. In the early 90s, IndyCar was booming with big-name drivers along with big sponsors. Mansell's move to the series obviously increased this, and Ayrton Senna even had a winter test with Penske the previous winter before deciding to rejoin McLaren. With Formula One seeing this interest in IndyCar, they decided perhaps they should try to race on ovals as well. At a meeting in early 1993, an F1 commission approved ovals for the 1994 schedule along with a possibility to run 500-mile races. Bernie Ecclestone even mentioned that ovals could potentially be a way to help increase the interest in Formula One in the United States, and also mentioned that he was expecting 2 ovals to be built in Europe and another 3 being built outside of North America. There is also further speculation that FISA would try to persuade the Indianapolis 500 to allow a Formula One class to race alongside the IndyCars, but the president of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Tony George, said, "I don't know what they're talking about. I haven't heard anything from FISA about this idea." When put before the World Council, ovals were once again approved to be added in 1995 with the possibility of coming in 1994 along with the 500-mile races, but the story appeared to die down after. Later in the summer, rumors emerged that an oval would be built in Berlin, Germany, and that both FISA and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway would assist in its development. There is no mention of the track hosting a Formula One race on the oval, but the facility was never built. Construction on the Lausitz Ring, which was a circuit south of Berlin that included an oval and hosted 2 IndyCar races, started in 1998, but I'm not sure if this has any connection to the proposed Berlin Oval. Along with the Berlin rumor, there were rumors of other ovals being built. Tom Wheatcroft, who owned Donington Park, was looking to build the first oval in Britain. He said the track would be built about 40 miles south of Donington and would include a 1.5-mile oval as well as a 2.2-mile road course in the facility. Wheatcroft said that the new track would aim to be part of the potential FIA Oval Championship, and he also said he would be hoping to host NASCAR at the circuit as well. He said he wanted it to be the biggest and best circuit this country has ever seen. There were a few other proposals to build ovals in Britain around the same time, one of which we'll get to next, but none of these early proposals ever got off the ground until construction started at Rockingham Motor Speedway in 1999. Another place in which an oval was considered being built was at Silverstone, and had the proposal gone through, it would have been one of the most unique ovals to have existed. Instead of the turns being left, the planned oval would have right-hand turns to avoid the repositioning of the existing barriers. The oval would start at what was the back end of the circuit those days, with Club being turn 1, and then take a slight right before coming to Abbey. This would take them onto the test circuit inside the Grand Prix track, and after 2 right-hand turns, they would rejoin the Grand Prix track at the exit of Beckett's and onto the Hangar Straight. Stowe would then be the last corner. Plans also included adding banking for the turns at the northern end that were not part of the Grand Prix circuit, and the oval would be 1.875 miles long, which would have been one of the longer ovals as well. For our final story, we have an interesting proposed head-to-head between Formula One and IndyCar. With IndyCar's popularity growing, Bernie Ecclestone couldn't resist trying to have a showdown between the two. His idea was at the Formula One finale in Adelaide to have a race which included 4 top drivers in each series, with a winner receiving £5 million. The Australian tourist minister supported the idea as well, saying it would be one of the world's great sporting events. However, there was a catch for the IndyCar teams. Had Ecclestone's proposal been accepted, the Formula One drivers would race their Formula One cars, and the IndyCar drivers would race their Indy cars. With Formula One cars being much quicker on a street circuit, the IndyCar owners rejected the idea, with Carl Haas saying, "I think he's just trying to get some attention for F1 during the month of May." A week later, Roger Penske replied saying he and the other team owners never received an invitation, but would accept if Ecclestone provided a level playing field. He said, "We'll provide 8 Indy cars, run any place you want to go. You provide 4 Williams and 4 McLarens, and we'll meet. The ball's in your court, Bernie." He even added to a suggestion saying that they should race at a facility in which they can race on an oval one day and a road course the next. When Ecclestone heard this proposal, he denied it, saying, "I made the offer because the IndyCar people publicized their street race in Surface Paradise, saying that they had the fastest cars in the world. Well, let's have a road race of 100 miles or so. They can put up or shut up. We won't race on an American oval because they're dangerous. We would race on a FISA-approved oval when one is built in Europe." He also added that having it done properly would be difficult, and that he was not trying to say that one was better than the other, but it was like comparing boxing and wrestling. While something like this happening genuinely would have been interesting, it was something that obviously was never going to happen and was probably more just some banter going on back and forth between the two series. So that's all I have for 1993 rumors. Hopefully you enjoyed these, and let me know which one was your favorite and which ones you would have liked to see happen. Also, let me know if you want to see more videos about old rumors. Thanks for watching.